So if we look at Syria today, Syria has no military to defend itself. The 90% of its military capability is finished. It's sufficient to defeat the IDF. IDF is not a superpower. So the dismantlement of the Knesset, the destruction of Tel Aviv, perhaps at the hands of a regime foreign to Palestine, civil war amongst the Jewish population, well, the Pakistani army can take out Israel in a week. So recently I was in the headlines, in the Sun newspaper, in the Times, in the Sunday Times, for having said have no mercy on the Maccabee fans.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends and the foes out there, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this show on all 4 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky, do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Minutes YouTube channel. Today's guest is a dear brother, friend, teacher, companion, mentor, someone who's making his 3rd appearance on the Blood Brothers podcast. He's a UK-based scholar, lecturer, debater and author. Requires no introduction, especially in recent months, but that's none other than my dear brother and friend Shaykh Asrar Rashid. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
You've brought me out to Birmingham, Shaykh.
Yes, so I had to get you out of Bedford and bring you into busy Birmingham.
A lot's been happening in Birmingham. You've been busy, not by any reason of your own doing, but you have been hitting some headlines recently.
Yes, so the mainstream UK media, they just place us in headlines when it suits a media slant or a media bias. So recently I was in the headlines, in the Sun newspaper, in the Times, in the Sunday Times, for having said have no mercy on the Maccabee fans. And of course, there is no need for me to even clarify what was meant, because the statement was made in Amsterdam, in Holland, in the context of the Maccabee fans carrying out violence against the residents of Amsterdam and the people of Holland, and causing dissension within Holland, destabilizing public order in Holland. And I feared the same would occur in Birmingham if Maccabee fans were permitted to enter Birmingham. Many of them, of course, being IDF. Irrelevant to whether they are IDF, the entire Israel is deemed as an occupying force.
And we know that Ireland, the Irish FA, they've recently put in a motion to kick Israel out of UEFA. So I hope, inshallah, that's successful.
So Ireland historically and currently has more moral positions, political positions in some things in comparison to their European counterparts, especially in comparison to our country, the UK.
I'd say Ireland, Spain, and a few other countries have a better principled position on Palestine than practically most Muslim majority countries, to be honest.
Yes, so we would say Ireland is more principled than the UAE, for instance.
For sure.
And other nation states within the Middle East.
Now, this is your 3rd appearance, and in all the episodes we've done before, I always kick off the episode with some quick fire questions to do with Hanafi fiqh and some rulings. So I'll kick you off. What is a Hanafi ruling when you forget the rakat in your salah, when you're praying on your own?
So if you forget the cycle, what number cycle you are on, you look at what is known, you estimate what is known as the dhan ghalib, what you deem as the cycle that you are in, and you pray from that. So if you're confused, are you in the 4th cycle or the 3rd? Your dhan ghalib, which is your predominant thought, is 3rd cycle. You complete the prayer as if you are praying from the 3rd cycle, and then you do sajda to sahw, which is the prostration of forgetfulness. In the Hanafi school, it's done by a salam to the right once, and then completing the tahiyat again and the salawat at the end of the prayer.
Would the same apply for, let's say, someone, for whatever reason, they forgot to say a surah after Surah Fatiha?
Yes, so reciting a surah after Surah Al-Fatiha is a wajib in the Hanafi school. Forgetting to do so requires sajda to sahw, because it's a wajib. In the fard prayer, it's only a wajib in the first 2 cycles. in the sunnah prayers and the wajib prayers, after in every cycle, after Surah Al-Fatiha, you recite either a long ayatul Quran or a short surah of the Quran, or any surah of your choice.
What about when you're in salah and you definitely know you've made a mistake and you've missed a rak'ah? Do you do sajdat al-saw or do you start again your prayer?
No, if you know for definite you've missed a rak'ah, depending in which situation you are in the prayer, you complete the rak'ah.
Okay.
And if, however, you miss a wajib, during that process, you make sajda to sahw.
Are there any circumstances in which you break the prayer?
You invalidate the prayer if, meaning if you forget.
Yeah. If you forget a cycle, you forget which rak'ah, is there any circumstance in which...
There can be. It depends on the scenario.
Okay. For most Hanafis, at least from South Asian descent, if you go to a masjid which is predominantly that demographic on Jum'ah, you'll see that they pray 4 rak'ah before Salatul Jum'ah, and there's some rak'ahs that are prayed after Jum'ah. What are those rak'ahs?
That's based on a hadith in the Tabarani regarding sunan prayers, 4 sunan prayers, which are mentioned after the Salatul Jum'ah. There is a hadith on that. So recently, Mirza Ali Engineer, who was arrested in Pakistan, makes controversial speeches, claims traditional Hanafis are misguided on certain points. One of the claims he made was that there is no proof or from the Sunnah, from the Hadith, for the 4 cycles, 4 Sunnah that are performed after the 2 cycles of Fard Jummah. But there is a Hadith for that, which is found in one of the collections of At-Tabarani.
But what about, I've noticed 4 rak'ah is prayed before Jum'ah.
That's also established from the Sunnah.
Okay. Within the Hanafi school, is there an acknowledgement of the 2 rak'ah you pray upon entering a masjid?
Yes, so Tahiyatul Masjid in the Hanafi school is an option to be carried out. It's not essential to sit in the masjid. It's not essential to perform Tahiyatul Masjid.
Okay. What is the Hanafi ruling on the niqab? And more specifically, it's not really the niqab, it's the face as awra.
So the Shafi'i ruling is strict, but in the Hanafi school, they do mention khawful fitna. If there's a khawful fitna, which is fear of a fitna, then the woman, it becomes wajib for her to wear niqab. Now, some people ask, is it essential for women in the UK to wear niqab? What I would say regarding the hijab, you go to Makkah al-Mukarramah, the world's women from all over the world attend the pilgrimage in Hajj, in Umrah with hijab. You see all types of hijab. No one condemns the types of hijab you may see in Al-Masjid al-Haram. In Al-Masjid al-Haram, all the various types of hijab are found. Nigerian women will be wearing hijab. Indonesian women will be wearing hijab. What I would say is any one of those type of hijabs is permitted in Islam. So it doesn't have to be wearing a particular type of hijab from one traditional or cultural setting. So some people think only one type of hijab is permitted, but by ijma', by consensus of the Muslim world today, we observe the world's women attending Hajj, and there is no condemnation from any of the ulama, whether in Makkah or anywhere else, that these type of hijabs are impermissible. So that should be a ruling for Muslims in the UK, that you see all those women attending Hajj, choose the hijab that you believe appropriate for yourself, and it's permissible.
But the face being awra does have premise within the Hanafi school.
Only khawf al-fitna, fear of al-fitna. It's not deemed as awra for the women. But the feet are awra outside of the prayer. So when they say the women are permitted to uncover their feet in the salah, that's in reference to the salah. But outside of the salah, the feet are awra. So the feet must be covered.
Hands?
Hands are not awra.
Okay. Are there any Hanafi jurists that adopted that voice would be awra? Or is that just an aspect
Yes,
of hand?
so in the fiqh works you do find with regard to the voice being awra, this is why they mention the adhan of the woman is not permitted. So they do mention when she beautifies the voice, that's deemed as awra in the Hanafi school. And there are some Ahnaf who are very strict on the face veil also. There are some Hanafis who are strict on the face veil. You find verdicts of, for instance, a Shaykh Asrar of Halab, rahimahullah, he has a strict verdict on face veils. But the general fatwa is the hijab that you find in Makkah al-Mukarramah of every nation, that is the hijab that is permitted in general. But then you may have specific rulings for specific situations.
Can someone who generally regards himself or herself as a Hanafi, can they join their prayers whilst travelling if the Imam or the one who is leading the Salah is non-Hanafi?
Firstly, you are permitted to pray behind a non-Hanafi Imam. There are some people who ask that additional question. They say, can you pray behind a non-Hanafi Imam? There's people who ask.
Really?
Yes.
Well, is there some objection to that?
No, there's just a confusion amongst some people.
Okay.
Additionally, Jam' bayna salatayn. This is combining of the prayer. Combining of the prayer is permitted as long as you follow the shurut of combining according to the Shafi'i school. So this is found in the Hashia of Ibn Abidin, in Raddul Muhtar, the most reliable work of the Hanafi school. Just before Kitabul Adhan, there is a discussion where he has, where in Durrul Mukhtar at the top, he mentions he states combination of prayer is only permitted in the darura, when there's a necessity. But Ibn Abidin writes in the bottom, the truth is it's permitted without necessity also, but as long as you follow the shurut of the school that permits combination. So you cannot combine the prayer unless you know the conditions of combination according to that other school.
So basically, you can't combine the prayer, and if you do, you have to follow the fiqh of that school.
The shurut,
The conditions.
The conditions, yes.
But why can't
The
you
conditions are very basic.
But why can't you do taqleed behind a non-Hanafi Imam?
So, technically you are permitted to follow a non-Hanafi Imam. He can give you a fatwa because al-aami la madhhaba lahu. The layman has no school, he follows his mufti.
Yeah.
So if you are traveling with a shaykh, a faqih, and he gives you the fatwa to combine, you combine. But he will tell you the odd few things. For instance, in the Shafi'i school, niyyah is essential for wudu. But as a Hanafi, if you perform your wudu without niyyah, and then you pray like a Shafi'i, your prayer is not done. So he will tell you the shurut very quickly.
Last one.
But generally speaking, in airports, people do combine. Meaning you're boarding a plane.
Do you combine?
I combine when there's a necessity. Me as a Hanafi, I generally stick to the Hanafi school. Very rarely I would take a rukhsa from the other schools. But the rukhsa is permitted. Rukhsa from other schools is permitted with the shurut of those schools. So I do give rukhsa to people. The leeway is permitted.
So you can adopt so long as you're adopting the conditions of that school.
Within that school. What's not permitted is talfiq. Talfiq is combining in such a way that the ruling is not permitted according to any school. Now, at one point, I boarded a plane and combined my prayers, and some people objected to me, saying, why are you combining the prayers? It's not permitted in the Hanafi school. They ended up missing the prayer and doing qada. So that's extremism. When we arrived in Al-Madinah Al-Munawwarah, I showed the person various works where they mentioned this is actually permissible. This was in 2014.
Now I see that you've got your leather socks on. Are there any other type of socks besides those that Hanafis can wipe over?
So you can wipe over cotton socks if they fulfill the conditions like the leather socks, which includes waterproof. So waterproof cotton socks are permitted, waterproof.
Can that be judged through whether if you wipe your socks, water will seep through? Is that a way of measuring it?
So the common cotton socks would not be permitted.
Okay.
It would have to be waterproof cotton socks. And that's in the full schools. So there will be some Hanbalis who will contest that is not the position in the Hanbali school. I've discussed this with many of them. Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi in Al-Mughni, he mentions the conditions within the Hanbali school. They mention the word thaqinain, which means very thick socks. So some of the Hanabila, they try saying that as long as they are thick, it's permissible. But some of the Damashqi Hanabila from my shuyukh I talk to, they say no, that means waterproof. As you know, the Damashqi Hanabila are more or less influenced by the other schools.
A bit more progressive. Would that be all?
No, not progressive.
Lenient.
You would say the Damashqi Hanabila, the 4 schools in Damashq, are more Ash'ari leaning, Sufi leaning, and therefore some of the rulings they would differ with, let's say, the Hanabila from Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, they would be influenced from the scholars of Najd.
So that kind of nicely leads us to Syria, because you mentioned Dimashq, you mentioned the scholars of Damascus, and a lot's happened. We're approaching 1 year since Bashar fell. I ask you squarely, since his falling on the 8th of December, do you believe it's been a net positive or a net negative for the Muslims of Syria?
What we have is one regime gone and another regime in. And with every Arab regime, there are pros and cons. So there are pros with Saddam Hussein. There are cons with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein had good things and bad things. So there are pros and cons with the current regime. There are pros and there are cons. Similarly with Bashar, before 2010, there were mainly cons, but there were some pro. Mainly cons, meaning we've discussed this before with the suppression of the Ba'athist regime and Ba'athist ideology being superimposed on the Syrian people as well as the Iraqi people, because Saddam Hussein
Was a Ba'athi as well.
was a Ba'athi, even though a different brand, because he took Mish'al Aflaq, the founder of
He
Ba'athism,
was a Christian, wasn't he?
Christian Syrian,
Yeah.
founded Ba'athism in Syria, in Damascus, in the Cafs of Damascus. And Ba'athism spread across the Middle East. The Egyptians adopted Ba'athism under Gamal Abdel Nasser. Syrians adopted Ba'athism. And then the Ba'athism post 1970 became a semi-extreme Alawi Ba'athism. Druze also. And then in Iraq, Saddam Hussein, who was Sunni, adopted Ba'athism, but also, if you remember, Mish'al Aflaq was exiled from Syria, taken in by Saddam Hussein, who then, strangely, when Mish'al Aflaq died in 1989, Saddam claimed he became a Muslim and even carried his coffin. At least he tried justifying that by saying he became a Muslim. So there is controversy whether Mish'al Aflaq actually did adopt Islam or not.
Is it fair to liken the government led by Ahmad al-Shara to that of the Bashar regime?
No, you can liken him to... No, it's not fair to liken him to Bashar al-Assad. No.
In case any viewers were like, are you comparing the two as if they're
No,
the same?
you do not compare the two, because as it stands now, so I have contact with people in Syria, there is this relief that there is no Ba'athism, no kafir type Alawiism, that because the Alawi Mukhabarat, as we know, secret police, people I know, they would take them to prisons. These are non-Syrians, by the way, hit their heads against the wall and swear at Allah. This is before the war, but it was not as exacerbated as it was during the war. So you do not have that type of suppression of Sunnis, but there will be oppression against other groups at this point. We have to acknowledge that. Because
but in acknowledging that, do we at least appreciate the challenges faced by the new government, in the sense that how many of those minorities are actually being used?
Complicit.
Are complicit? No, not just complicit, but they're being pawns for external players.
So the Druze have really showed themselves up by aligning themselves with what is known as Israel.
Hikmat al-Hijri.
So those specific Druze, because there are Druze who are still pro-Syria. Then with the Nusayris, the Alawis, there will be those who were a part of the suppression of Bashar al-Assad and his regime.
The vast majority benefited from that regime, Sheikh.
No, there was a class division amongst the Alawis. There was a clear class division.
But if you were to compare that division to the
There were Sunnis who benefited.
I know, but what I'm saying...
The merchant class of Syria, why would we single out Alawis when there was a class of Sunni merchants that were a part of the Syrian regime?
Because Alawites benefited in much greater number. They've benefited as a collective.
That's simply
Sunnis
because
didn't benefit as a collective.
That's simply because the Sunnis made the larger proportion of the population. Alawis made a small proportion of the population.
And they benefit from that.
And they had joined the army.
Yep.
Pre-1970, many of the Sunnis refused to join the army because they saw joining the army as being a job for the lower classes. The Alawis took those positions in the army and benefited from the regime takeover. Why I say it's a new regime? Because Sunni ulama still need licenses to teach in the masjid. Meaning, we've overthrown one despot, but to teach in the masjid, you still need a license. We don't have that in Pakistan or Bangladesh, or even in India. Even in Hindu-dominated India, an imam does not require a license to teach in the masjid. In Britain, in this country of ours, we do not require a license to go into the masjid and just hold a dars. There are shuyukh I know who do not have licenses and they cannot teach in the masjid. Meaning, so it's one regime replaced with another. He also sold state secrets. So after they take over, after the fall of Bashar, Cohen, this Jewish spy from the 1960s, his dossier, which was, I think, 2,000 folders, were given to Israel by the Shara regime, gifted to the Israeli regime. So these are cons.
What are the pros? Tell me about the pros.
So, like I would mention in previous times, I would mention Bashar al-Assad, and I would mention things like there's relative security in the country, people had their basic amenities. These were the pros in his time, and there were cons, many cons. With the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the pro is that the war has finished. The civil war, or we could say the largest scale civil war, because there is still fragmentation in the country.
Of course, in the Kurdish East and so forth.
Yeah, so there's fragmentation, but the larger scale, the Russian planes have stopped bombing. The Shabiha is not going around killing people.
Hezbollah and Iranian militias are not there.
Hezbollah is not in Syria. They should not be in Syria. They should be in Lebanon. And the Alawis are not empowered in a way that they do not deserve to be empowered.
Are you happy about that?
Yes.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Yes. So, and likewise, remember when I was interrogated in Syria, I was interrogated by Christian officers. They were Christian Arabs. But having said that, some of the pros, there is general freedom in Damascus. Damascus specifically for Sunnis and for others in the city. What occurs in the countryside, like in Idlib, parts of Idlib, or what occurs around the countryside of Damascus, there will be some fragmentation. There are people who want to take revenge on those people they see as having been pro-Bashar. This is a convoluted matter. Why is it convoluted?
Ahmad al-Shah has been criticized for not being as harsh enough in getting retribution.
Yes.
He's had to hold a lot of his guys back because they want, and Sunni Arabs back because they want retribution.
Yes, so this aspect of retribution against people they saw as pro-Bashar. There were ulama and public figures that sided with Bashar post-Hama. From 1982 all the way to 2011, they attended Eid with him, they attended Jum'ah with him. Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi visited Syria in 2005 when I was there. He praised Bashar al-Assad at that time. He was criticized by people who were anti-revolution at that time for overpraising Bashar al-Assad. But there were shuyukh that I do not want to mention their names, who attended, we attended Eid prayer with those shuyukh, but they would praise Bashar al-Assad. Post 2011, they changed their stance. They went against the regime. So they were given that chance. So with the fall of the regime, those ulama who did not support killing, those ulama and public figures who did not support killing of the public, who do not have blood on their hands, they should be left alone. Ahmad al-Shara has carried out the correct policy with those people. The likes of Al-Mufti Abdul Fattah Bizam, the Mufti of Damascus, he has cordial relations with him. He was the Mufti under Bashar, now he is with Ahmad al-Shara. So there are ulama who fall into that bracket, and Ahmad al-Shara recognizes that.
Most of the major Ash'ari scholars seem to be happy and
Relieved.
content. Relieved, yeah.
Of course they are relieved.
The Awqaf is made up majority of ulama from that leaning.
Yes. So initially they placed the nephew or the son-in-law of Nasiruddin al-Albani. Initially. There was protest against that. They had the head of the Awqaf replaced. And they are a majority Ash'ari, Sufi. And even some of the Atharis you have in Syria, what some of them people would label as Salafis, they are not as extreme. Those who are Syrian, they are not as extreme. Many of them, not all. There was the newly placed Mufti of Halab who gave the wrong fatwa, that you can eat during suhoor, pre-dawn meal in Ramadan. When the adhan for Fajr is given, you can carry on eating. This contradicts all 4 schools. Now he's someone we would label as a Wahhabi. He gave that fatwa. One of the shuyukh in Damascus.
So just so we're on that, 4 schools say as soon as the adhan goes off, you stop eating.
You stop.
Completely.
Yes. So in Saudi Arabia,
what about swallowing what's in your mouth already?
So if it's in your mouth, you swallow.
Okay.
But this Mufti gave a fatwa that's out of the 4 schools. There were shuyukh in Damascus, shuyukh that I know, who gave the fatwa openly against him. They wrote a fatwa against him. To the credit of the current government, they didn't take action on those shuyukh. So, but that would happen in the time of Bashar, by the way, also. There were pro-regime scholars who gave fatwas that were misguided, and scholars would speak against them. And Bashar wouldn't take any action, he would leave the ulama to it, like Ahmad Hassoun. Now with Ahmad Hassoun, he has been arrested, the former Mufti of Syria, and he's under trial. So as long as he faces a fair trial, but did he face imprisonment with torture? These are questions we have to ask. Why I ask this? What is the purpose of overthrowing a regime at the cost of tens of thousands of Muslim and non-Muslim lives if the new regime will oppress their opponents? Meaning, this is like Animal Farm. We overthrow a dictator. We have the power. Will we carry out acts of violence which do not go through the due process in accordance with our deen?
Okay. If we look at what Ahmad al-Shara and his government are experiencing right now, and have done so for the last 12 months, they've got external pressure, right? They've still got Hezbollah at some of the borders who are still trying to trade things in and out. That's not completely gone. You have the interference of Western states who are continuously pressuring Shara to make certain concessions in terms of what type of Syria is going to be the new Syria. You've got Shara's own people within his own ranks who are a bit more hardline, the ones who fought physically on those in that week that led to the downfall of Bashar. We have people whose entire families have been destroyed. So what I'm saying is that given that he's got all these challenges, and given that Syria is 80% in rubble, when we think of Gaza right now, when you go to Syria, Sheikh, and I went to all the major cities, I told you, when Sheikh, it all looks like Gaza. It's decimated. Considering that those are his many challenges, can a harsher approach to dealing with internal state threats be justified?
So harsher approach, if it violates the Sharia of Allah, is not justified.
Does the Sharia ever allow or exempt
torturing any prisoners like Ahmad Hassoun? Ahmad Hassoun, by the way, is a person that a fatwa of kufr was placed on him in 2009 or 2010. Ahmad Hassoun, by the way, is someone who made statements against the Prophet ﷺ in 2009 or 10. I was involved in the process of gaining fatwas against him. So the ulama gave fatwas. Even a Shaykh al-Buti gave a statement against Ahmad al-Hassoun. I had that fatwa attained from Shaykh al-Buti, And there were other shuyukh of Syria who spoke against Ahmad al-Hussein. There was shuyukh from Pakistan, a Shaykh Ahmad Dawesi, he gave a fatwa against Ahmad al-Hussein. So he's not someone I have a good history with, but at the same time, I would say very clearly, condoning any torture of Ahmad al-Hussein, any torture. The man is over 70. He deserves a fair trial. Similarly, any public figure deserves a fair trial. Shooting people who are a part of the Alawi regime in front of their children, in front of their families, is doing the same as what Bashar and his goons did with others. So that should never be justified.
I don't think they've endorsed that though.
They've not endorsed it, but those who have done this must be taken into account. They must carry out the Sharia ruling would be blood money or whatever appropriate Sharia application. In that sense, the Taliban is better than Ahmad Shara. They apply Hanafi fiqh. You know where and what they are applying. So similarly, he's not justified in selling state secrets. So what I mentioned about
to prevent a greater harm,
the Cohen files,
to prevent a greater harm,
the harm has been carried out. Israel destroyed 90% of the Syrian military capabilities.
I'm talking about open invasion now.
They've invaded Syria. Quneitra is invaded.
I know, but it's not been entirely taken in the sense that
his giving of the files was in December last year.
Yeah.
After the fall of the regime, it did not make Israel desist.
This is true.
So his pragmatism failed in that case.
Do you believe that he has the difficult challenges at
Yes,
hand?
he does.
Perhaps one of the most...
All leaders do.
Now, but do you think Ahmad al-Shara and Syria specifically as a nation, in terms of what it's gone through, in terms of the sheer number of death and destruction, the hundreds and thousands of returning refugees, the various hyenas and bad faith actors externally and internally that want it to fail, I think...
This is why he's reached out to Russia. So after Russian planes destroyed Syria, but he's gone and made ties with Russia.
He's in the States as we speak right now.
Yes, so he's gone to visit Putin, the same person who actually destroyed the infrastructure of Syria. So making links with Putin is, of course, pragmatism, but at the same time, it's a deep politics. People who hold my position do not contradict themselves. If someone called for regime change tomorrow in Egypt, I would be against it. Why? Because of the bloodshed, not because I'm an Abdul Fattah Sisi supporter. So the way initially...
When you say regime change, you mean from the Awam, yeah?
Yes, from the public. The only people who are permitted to carry out regime change are the Ahlul Halli wal Aqd, people who can actually change the regime with the minimum amount of bloodshed.
So you're not necessarily against military coups or bloodless military coups?
Bloodless military coups are very good.
Okay.
If that were to be carried out, that is good. But the public, I would never encourage the public to take up arms or to go out into the streets. It's not my blood being shed. So that was my position at the beginning of the Syrian civil war. Now that the regime has changed, if someone says to me we must topple Ahmad al-Shara, so listen to this, I would say no, we should not topple Ahmad al-Shara. It's a consistent approach because it leads to more bloodshed. Ahmad al-Shara is a Muslim.
Do you intentionally use the term regime over government when describing Ahmad al-Shara's government?
All of them are regimes. All the governments in that region are regimes. There's not a single government that is not a regime. They're all regimes.
Okay, but regime generally...
It's a consistent statement.
I know, but regimes in a political science type of terms is usually something that's negative.
Well...
Which, by the way, most of the governments of the Muslim majority world are. Sadly.
I only support the Khilafah
Yep.
ala Nahj al-Nabuwah. I do not support a single government in the region or in the world, in the entire world. I am a global citizen. I do not support any government. I'm critical of all governments. Pakistan, Bangladesh, well, Hasina's gone now.
Yes. Yeah, good.
Modi, Iraq, Iran, I'll be critical. So when they do good, I will point it out, this is a good thing. When they do bad, I will say this is bad. Ahmad al-Shara will do something good, we will praise the action. Abdul Fattah Sisi will do something good, we will praise the action. They do something bad, And this is what I said to you in the previous podcast.
When was the last time you recall Abdel Fattah al-Sisi doing something good? Just out of curiosity. I was thinking that as you said that. I was thinking, when was the last time you did something
Well,
good?
if he did, that's why the clause of if Abdel Fattah Sisi did something good, we would praise him for that good. And likewise, any of the regimes in that region, the entire region.
That and staying on the region, and because the events of the region have impacted stuff at home. If we look at the last 2 years of the genocide that we've all witnessed, live streamed on our screens, on our smartphones, subhanAllah, the death and destruction, the dystopian level of violence that we've seen, it's had an impact not just on the Muslims or diaspora communities, it's had an impact on white Western non-Muslims, many of them. So much so that the public opinion has significantly shifted. Most public opinions in the UK and the US show that it's either 50-50 amongst the general public, whether they're pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. But what they've all documented and registered is a generational shift amongst millennials, Gen Z, that have gone from indifferent or neutral to completely anti-Israel now. What I've observed, and let me know your thoughts on this, is that because of this significant shift in opinion, and I always make it clear, brothers and sisters, when we talk about these seismic changes in the West, we're not saying that these are some type of precursors to liberation of Al-Aqsa. That happens in the hands of the Muslims, inshallah ta'ala. I don't see that happening in the hands of the West. Do you?
No, of course not.
But nevertheless, it's still a significant shift in change. These are tomorrow's voters. These are people who are going to be voting in parties. The Zionist Israeli lobby is obviously very threatened by this. They've seen the influence of TikTok in changing the public opinion of the youth. That's why they bullied the US. The US bullied China to basically sell off TikTok to Palantir. We're seeing all types of efforts to claw back what I would say a lost generation who will forever remember this genocide amongst the white non-Muslim Westerners. That's impacted things at home. It's impacted you in Birmingham to the extent where we've seen a surge of Islamophobia. We've seen a refocusing on Muslims and migrants as an existential threat. We've seen this in the US, we've seen it in the UK. We've seen how in the space of 7 to 10 days, Birmingham became a focus of spotlight with Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. Some of your statements that were taken out of context. We saw that when UKIP attempted to march in East London Tower Hamlets. So there's been a lot of this happening. What are your thoughts in how much of those things in the UK that I've just mentioned is linked to what's happening in Palestine?
So I'll take you back to our previous podcast. If you remember, in our previous podcast, we discussed the Assad regime and we discussed Palestine. And what did I say to you in that podcast? I said to you the most important issue facing the Muslim Ummah today is Palestine. And everyone should focus on Palestine. And that was pre-October.
No, we did it after October.
No, it was pre-October
Was it pre?
2023. Yes, pre.
Carry on, Sheikh.
I take you back to that. That's the reason I'm taking you back to that. My book, Intellectual Intifada, was written before October the 7th. And the podcast we did was in summertime, 2023. And I said to you, the Muslim Ummah should focus solely on Palestine. And of course, there were people who were critical of me at the time.
You're correct.
Yes, so summer 2023.
Before October the 7th.
I said everyone should focus on Palestine. And I'm saying the same again. So if Hezbollah's weapons are being taken through Lebanon via Syria, this was the complex nature of the Syrian war. Because you had the suppression of the Baathists, of Sunni Syrians.
But those same weapons were used against the Sunnis
This
of
is
Syria.
what I'm mentioning, the complexity of the situation. That those weapons were being taken to Lebanon for Hezbollah to utilize against Israel, but then the complexity of the Syrian war made the situation so emotive that the Hezbollah defense against Israel in Lebanon was weakened. So we witnessed that in the past 2 years. You had the sectarian aspect of the war, the Iranian regime and their support for Bashar's regime, and which I would say a total failure of Iran to support Bashar, because Iran should have shifted its support. They knew it's a popular. Remember I said to you in the previous podcast, it was a organic popular uprising initially. Some people will disagree with me on that, but others will disagree because my view doesn't align totally with anyone.
Yes, others would indicate that it was orchestrated from the very beginning.
In the beginning it was organic, but the Iranian regime and Putin misjudged which side they should support. At that time they should have taken Bashar aside and have words with Bashar, but they misjudged the entire situation. Now that had ramifications for Palestine, the entire civil war, 14-year civil war. But October the 7th had ramifications for the fall of the Bashar regime.
Because it weakened Hezbollah, it weakened Iran.
Yes. So the entire situation is so complex, people cannot simplify it to Shia Sunni. They cannot simplify it to Shia Sunni. Because Bashar transcended that by being a Ba'athist. They cannot simplify it to Hezbollah just being a Shia militant group. It's also an Arab Lebanese militant group, meaning there's more complexity to that situation. And there was Sunni support for Hezbollah pre-revolution.
Yeah, 2006.
Yes. So if you remember, the Lebanese Shia were welcomed into, I was in Syria by the way at the time, they were welcomed into Sunni homes. There was, that distinction was not made, Sunni Shia.
Which made their intervention even that worse.
Yes, so Syrians were hurt by Hezbollah's intervention because
they were welcomed in 2006.
In 2006, I was there in Syria. They supported Hezbollah in its incursions into occupied Palestine at the time. So the complexity is not the way, and then you have, of course, the Kurdish situation, 300,000 Kurds without Syrian citizenship, and then Bashar attempting to give them citizenship. There is a nationalistic issue, there's a linguistical issue, the division between the Kurds and the Arabs, and then not only the Sunni Arabs, all the Arabs, and then also the complexity of Turkey's politics in Syria. So for some people to simplify it, meaning popular speakers, they simplify it to Sunni Shia, Kufr and Islam, secular versus Islamic. It's not that simple.
It has all of those dimensions within it.
Yes, so it's very complex, and this is why we have the trolls on X and Twitter, who extremists generally see everything in black and white. They cannot see the layers of grey in between. It's understanding those layers of grey.
Brothers and sisters and friends, I see that you're enjoying the content. How come you've not clicked subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel? And if you're watching via Rumble, how come you've not subscribed on our Rumble channel? If you like the content, you like the guests, you like what we're talking about, it's absolutely inexcusable and cheeky for you not to click subscribe. Thank you and Jazakallah khair. What's your thoughts on tankies, without mentioning any names, white leftists who seem to have a very binary and extreme position on Syria? Like on the one hand, you'd think that they're part of the Muqawwama, the way they speak about Palestine, and then literally Syria, you'd see them in the diametric opposite end of any type of empathy for people who have been killed and maimed and displaced from their homes. Because Bashar and those types of Arab regimes, whether it be Gaddafi, Saddam, but Bashar especially, the Assad regime especially, had a fair amount of popular support amongst a demographic of white lefties who had a very black and white reading of it, people that we know mutually. What was your engagements with people from that type of thinking, who lacked empathy, who lacked the nuances of what Syria was and how it impacted the region and so forth?
I haven't engaged with people on this, on the issue of Syria. My position is seen as very nuanced. It's not with either side, and there's a reason for that. Those people will be looking at the macrocosm of the situation. Other people will look at the microcosm of the local issues. So the macrocosm, I can agree with them to a degree. For instance, the Gaddafi regime being overthrown by a NATO alliance, we are against that. There is an obvious agenda for overthrowing Gaddafi with a NATO alliance. But at the same time, meaning there was an agenda to overthrow Gaddafi. That was very clear. So those you describe as tankers,
Yeah.
they would point that out. But then there are those fighters who fight a war for liberation, but they do not realize that they are being utilized by those same people. So in Gaddafi's case, you had those people
From Benghazi, sincere people from Benghazi who rose up.
but people who also, what did they do with Gaddafi?
Of course, they obviously did. But then when they caught him.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is, again, that is something I would be very critical of.
Mm-hmm.
It's un-Islamic. What they did with Gaddafi, how they killed Gaddafi, was un-Islamic, meaning there's nothing Islamic about what they did. And then you talk to Libyans or you talk to Syrians, there will be Libyans, in the case of Libya, who will say life was good under Gaddafi. Some will say life was bad under Gaddafi. These are different opinions. So these tankies that you mentioned, I think, is that a word that's used in a derogatory
I mean, it's definitely not complimentary for sure.
Okay,
tankies kind of refers to this type of anti-imperialist, communist, left-leaning type of.
So their anti-imperial position is correct.
No, but the anti-imperial only is restricted to the West and not the anti-imperialism of Russia or China or any other type of what they perceive as socialist left-leaning powers. Their anti-imperialism is only restricted to America. And no one's debating that one of the greatest imperialistic oppressive nations of today is the US.
Let's look at case specific. So Libya as an example and Syria as an example. What we as Muslims, so some people, they wouldn't know what to label you. Some people would label us as Islamists. But because I'm not associated with any so-called Islamist group, whether it's Ikhwan or anyone else, they would just give you labels.
Well, most practicing politically astute Muslims and basic
would be labeled as Islamists. We must not become proxies for anyone. That is the main theme, I would say, that we cannot become proxies without having the upper hand.
But some things are out of
with the outcome.
Control, like you rightly just mentioned a few minutes ago, you said, look, sometimes there could be instances where people rise up, fight for sincere causes. And they don't mean, in fact, they could be fighting for something which is anti-imperialist, pro-Islam. But they, without knowing, or sometimes even knowing or miscalculating, end up fulfilling a different objective, a wider goal, a wider agenda.
So we would deem that as being like...
But that's not in their sphere of control sometimes.
A mistake in ijtihad. Some people could make a mistake in ijtihad. It's a ijtihad, meaning they believe having weapons supplied to them that will carry out a particular objective, but only the supply of weapons would be limited to the point that those who are being given the weapons can never utilize those weapons against those giving the weapons. These are things that are played out. Light weapons are given, not heavy artillery. So if we look at Syria today, Syria has no military to defend itself. The 90% of its military capability is finished. That military capability did not belong to the Alawis or the Baathists. It belongs to the Syrian people. October the 7th demonstrated, Yahya Sinwar and his group are, by the way, proscribed terrorist group in the UK. Just place that disclaimer.
Of course we know that.
But
we know that, Sheikh.
Yahya Sinwar demonstrated that the IDF is not invincible. If anything, Abu Ubaidah demonstrated that the IDF are not invincible. A very capable army, like this is debatable, the Pakistani army, can take out Israel in a week. Of course, it's debatable. The pundits, the pro-Israel pundits will say, no, the Pakistani army does not have those capabilities. But a very capable army could take out Israel in a week and take back Palestine. I believe that's possible. If you remember, in our live streams, I would say this years ago. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think...
I said military intervention in Palestine from a capable army would take out Israel. So
you do know that UK government has a legal obligation to intervene to prevent a genocide, and that includes militarily. They have signed up. The UK government has signed up. I forgot what the convention was, but it legally obligates them under international law to militarily intervene if required and justified to prevent a genocide. Adnan Hussain, MP from Blackburn, he wrote a letter, a statement. It was signed by the 4 or 5 MPs, and he articulated that very well. So when we talk about Muslim countries intervening, because these are one of the statements that have been taken out of context of yours, isn't it?
Yes.
When you speak about
Military intervention.
You're talking about the military intervention of Muslim majority countries
Yes.
intervening to prevent bloodshed and war crimes.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. Even when certain Muslims call on Muslim governments to do jihad fi sabilillah against Israel, they're talking about it from the context of intervention to prevent a
Yes.
genocide. Yeah?
So I was saying the pros and cons of what you refer to as tankies.
Yeah.
The pros and cons of those wars where Muslims become proxies.
Yeah.
So Syria's military capability being finished, for instance, that now Quneitra is occupied, and Ahmad al-Shara is obliged to make certain concessions.
Yeah.
Of course, some people were thinking that I'm criticizing Ahmad al-Shara on his trade deals with the United States. That wouldn't be deemed as haram. In Islamic law, making trade deals with China, Russia, or with the United States is meaning that is very understandable.
And the country needs to rebuild.
Yes,
the economy needs to be stimulated.
These are not the things that
needs investment. And
but what Muslims should never become is proxies of anyone.
But what I'm saying is that is that always in the sphere of control of the Muslims? That's what I'm trying to ask you.
So the lack of leadership leads to this. So in the during the Syrian civil war, Sheikh Ramadan al-Bouti said in 2011 to the people who were leading the revolution, tell me who your leader is and I will join you. They couldn't name a leader at that time. And Ahmad al-Shara, of course, was with ISIS at the time.
For a short period of time before he...
Short period of time, and many human rights abuses, crimes, and then of course blowing up Imam Nawawi's grave in 2016. All these things,
but he himself
they're a part of his track record.
Yeah, but he himself can't be held responsible.
But when people... No, he is responsible.
People act out of line. That happens all the time.
But at that time, if you remember, people compare him with Bashar. I'm not comparing him with Bashar. It's too early to compare him with Bashar. He's only 42 years old. It's too early to compare him with Bashar.
And he's not killed hundreds and thousands of people.
Because he doesn't have the capability. Otherwise, why wouldn't he not kill the IDF in Quneitra?
I tried taking the conversation away from Syria. You took it back to Syria.
Because of the implications of what occurred on October the 7th. So going back to
it's linked to what happened to Syria.
Yes, so
absolutely,
everything is interlinked, because Palestinian fighter groups that were deemed as pro-Bashar were banned in Syria, yes, dismantled and banned. So that had an effect on the Syrian resistance. The weapons that were going through Syria were stopped. The Iranian regime was removed from its role in Syria. These were all ramifications of October the 7th, because subsequently the Bashar regime fell.
So many things happened.
So then Jordan was affected.
Yep.
Egypt was affected. The entire region was affected. We were affected here. Politics here locally was affected.
Do you think it's interlinked?
Of course. Why? Because Al-Quds is the nerve center of the world. It's the artery of the world. You tamper with the artery or the nerve center of the world will be affected. So as long as people keep tampering with Al-Quds, the implications will be felt across the globe. So what we feel here in Birmingham, in the UK, Tommy Robinson, they call him Tommy 2 shekels or 10 shekels.
Tel Aviv Tommy, Tommy 10 names, Tommy 10 shekels.
His provocations and his troublemaking is all linked to Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv is the regime that occupies Palestine. So everything has a link. Even our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he's a Zionist.
As I mentioned earlier though, do you think that this shift in public opinion against Israel amongst the white Western populace, do you think that is the reason why the likes of Tommy Robinson have been catapulted back into the scene?
It's a possibility that there is a link between Tommy Robinson being catapulted and the shift that we observe within the what you said, white population or pro-Israel population previously, because it's really a capitalist society. Capitalism, Western capitalism, is pro-Zionism, and that's a very nasty combination.
Dangerous combination.
And capitalism, or Western-style capitalism, with all its bad traits, because currently the world is observing a fight between Islam and capitalism. But then you have capitalism combined with Zionism. So UAE is all capitalist, Zionist capitalist. Those are Zionist capitalist Arabs, and you have Zionist Arabs now. This is a new breed.
The Abraham Accords Arabs, yeah?
Yes, which make up a huge number, influential number within the Middle East. Why hasn't it made a shift in their positions? Seeing the slaughter of fellow Arabs, fellow Muslims, fellow Arab Christians, all of these being slaughtered in Palestine. Why have they not shifted? But yet what you mentioned, white, because I use these words very carefully because it's not a color designation. Me and you would be seen as privileged by people back in the East.
Of course, for sure.
Yes, but we're people of color. So here in the West, you have all these capitalists, whether black or white or Asian, but we have this capitalist mindset within the Middle East. And it's so complex because the designation of black and white, previously we would say the white man does this. And yes, that still exists because Donald Trump is a good example of that, where with the South Africans, he has only allowed 7,500, meaning a cap on the number of migrants, and he has preferred South African whites.
Yeah, the white boys.
So the nature of the capitalism is that it's embedded in white Western capitalism, but now it's transformed and transcended color, that it's inclusive of other racial groupings and ethnics, as long as you are Zionist.
As long as you fulfill the objectives of the ideology.
Yes, which is capitalism with Zionism. So that shift, will we observe a policy shift with the next generation? Because it takes a generation. A political event may happen in the 1960s. That generation of teenagers and college students will be in administrative positions, institutional positions 20 years later, and you may see a shift. Or will we see that they just integrate into the system and lose those political positions? How many college students are hippies, and then by the time they are made institutionalized,
they're like a Tory minister who's anti-immigrant, hateful.
Yes, so will it lead to a shift in Western policy? I think not.
Oh, you think that the jaspa that we're seeing amongst white Westerners, by the time but you think so?
Of course it's short-lived.
So you're not that optimistic?
I never trust, and I'll say this very clearly, I never trust a capitalist. It's not a racial thing. Malcolm X would have said a white man.
No, why
I don't say white man, because you get good white people who are Muslims, you get evil black people like Obama. You get evil Asian people, evil, I can name many of them, yeah? Rishi Sunak, and
Patel,
so many, with Muslim names as well.
Yeah.
So many shells.
Sajid Javid.
Yes, so many. So it's not a white and black and Asian designation. It's a capitalism with Zionism, and even that could shift in the time of Mussolini, when Mussolini occupied Libya and Umar al-Mukhtar, rahimahullah, fought against General Grassini. At that time, they were fascists. And now you have fascist regime again in Italy. But a fascism, he fought fascism, but it was the face of kufr at that time. The current face of kufr that we are fighting ideologically, militarily, in all the ways, is capitalism with Zionism. It's a combination of both. You know, if it was just capitalism alone, it would be easier to swallow. But it's capitalism with Zionism. And I believe, okay, at the moment we have anti-war protests, we have all of this is good, but will it lead to institutional change? Will it lead to a change in policy? I believe not.
Really?
Yes, I believe it won't lead to. a Western change in policy. Like you said, the downfall of the Knesset, what you mentioned, it will happen at the hands of the Muslims.
Yeah, that's standard.
The downfall of the Knesset, the dismemberment, dismantling of the IDF, which shocks all these Tommy Robinson fans. When I say this, they become shocked. He's calling for the fall of Israel. Yes, I am. The breakdown of the Knesset, the dismantlement of the IDF, taking them to criminal courts, treating them justly. I'll mention again, if I'm calling for Benjamin Netanyahu, if he was our prisoner, we are not permitted to torture him. How more just is Islam? As Umar al-Mukhtar said, they are not our teachers. You cannot torture Benjamin Netanyahu. He would have to go in front of a Qadi, and the Qadi will deal with him justly. And similarly, all the IDF. So at whose hands will that happen? That will happen at the hands of the Muslims, not due to Western intervention. No, the UN has displayed its total failure. Even UNRWA, that organization in the past, now it was framed as being a pro-Palestinian organization by the Israeli regime. Israeli occupation, I wouldn't even use the word regime, Israeli occupation. But UNRWA has been known in the past to attempt to resettle Palestinians. What does that even mean? It means Palestinians who lived in Jordan or Palestinians who lived in Syria or elsewhere, the regimes in some of those regions, what they would do is not give them permanent stay or passports, because they would say one day you will go back to Palestine. UNRWA attempted to resettle them. Why resettle them? That works in the favor of the demography of the so-called Israelis. So even in UN institutions, we do not trust you. Yes, they may play a role in providing food and jobs and these type of roles, but like I said to you,
liberation is not coming from there.
Liberation will only come through the Khilafah. I have advocated for that all my life, that only the Khilafah will liberate people. So even if you have regime changes across the, people now call for the...
and these regime changes at times could be favorable in some aspects to the Muslims and other aspects not.
No.
Yes.
So that's, Muslims need to weigh the pros and cons of different regime changes within the region. For instance, people who call for I'll give you an example, people who call for independent Kashmir. They should not call for an independent Kashmir. They should call for a greater Pakistan. What is the distinction between an independent Kashmir and a greater Pakistan? A greater Pakistan is in effect a return to the Mughal dynasty in that region. And the Mughal dynasty was ruled by the Sharia, Fatawa Alamgiri, some of the sultans like Aurangzeb. And it included all that region. And the breakaway, remember there was a call for the breakaway of Bengal by Lord Curzon. He wanted to break up the Bengal. Why the Bengal? Why were they targeting the Bengal? Bengal was a source, economic source,
rich in textiles,
for the
rich
Muslim.
in spices, rich for tea.
Exactly. And it's a Muslim majority region. It had a higher literacy rate than London. When the British took the region, it belongs to Greater Pakistan. So I advocate for Bangladesh to be a part of Greater Pakistan, Kashmir to be a part of Greater Pakistan, Delhi to be a part of Greater Pakistan. Of course, people will say Indian regime, they say it's a democracy, but
when you're saying Pakistan,
it's a nuclear power.
But when you're saying,
is it possible now? The answer is because both nations being nuclear powers, it doesn't seem feasible.
But when you say a greater Pakistan, just for the clarity of our viewers and listeners and those who may have national sentiments or grievances, what you're talking about here is a greater state which sticks to its founding principles of La ilaha illallah.
Yes, it goes back to the Fatawa Alamgiri.
Yeah, because many would say we don't want to be part of a greater Pakistan under the current administration. Please keep away from us. But in an administration which is it governs on the principles of its founding principles, and yes,
Islam.
Yes.
So similarly, within the region, these different regimes, they have their pros and cons, but ultimately, the Khilafah will return to Palestine, and that entails the breakdown of the Knesset and the IDF. and the IDF have demonstrated in the past 2 years they are not a fantastic army. David Icke, by the way, David Icke is one of my critics as well. He said Mossad has cutting edge technology. He's a conspiracy theorist. Cutting edge technology that can detect anything, giving this image that Tel Aviv has such technology that they can destroy anyone, giving the Hollywood image of what is known as Israel. This mindset has been now destroyed in the minds of the Muslims, and to the credit of the Iranian regime for bombing Tel Aviv. So rather than the bombs landing on fellow Syrians, that is where the bombs should have been directed. Similarly, when Pakistan and Afghanistan have their border skirmishes, you cannot side with either one. Why should two Muslim nations war with one another? Afghanistan and Pakistan, both of their guns should be directed towards a common enemy. That is a very consistent position.
And just in case this clip gets clipped out and then circulated, I'm sure aspects of it really always does from when we have a sit down. When we talk about the dismantling of Israel, if you want to know in international law jargon, it is absolutely within the right of the international community to dismantle an apartheid regime. A regime which subjugates its people, has racial-based laws where it favours one group over the other. In addition to this, the continuation and the speeding up of illegal settlements in the West Bank, and of course a genocide which we've seen for 2 years. There is absolute international law basis for the dismantling of such a regime, including through military intervention.
It cannot be defined as a state according to international law because of its undefined borders. There are many factors. Nations have dissolved in the past, Yugoslavia being a case in point. And I believe that Israel needs to be dissolved, made into one historical Palestine. The Jews can be a part of that historical Palestine as citizens, or what as we would say Ahlul Dhimma. They pay the jizya, those who are eligible, and they live as peaceful citizens, as those who have carried out.
There you're talking about an Islamic state though there?
Of course, yes. Restorative justice, to use a term that others would utilize, needs to be carried out. Now, of course, people will say the Palestinians need to decide whether it will be an Islamic Palestine or not. I'm looking at this holistically as a Muslim issue.
But there could be other precursors to that. There could be other setups before we reach that. We don't know.
I would want to mention on the basis of secular law, according to secular international law, you always look at the regime that governed that region prior to the current regime. So who ruled
Sahih, you're spot on.
Palestine?
I knew exactly what I was going to say.
1917.
The last time there was any semblance of peace, security, coexistence, flourishing
Ottoman.
of communities was the Uthmani Khilafah.
So you
That's
look
not even, I tweeted the other day and I said community note me. You can't community note that. The last system which governed Palestine
and the region
was the Ottoman Caliphate.
Yes.
That's it. That's not even up for debate.
So me talking about my mentioning of restoring the Caliphate has a basis. It's not based on a fantasy. It's not based upon a utopia. It's based on cohesion that existed in the region that held under Sultan Abdul Hamid, aside from...
Tom Barak acknowledged this recently. The US ambassador to Turkey and special envoy to Syria was on camera saying that the West messed up after the breakup of the Ottoman Caliphate. He acknowledged on camera, by the way, brothers and sisters, and any far-right Tommy Robinson fans, if you have the depth to even care for the truth, just Google Tom Barak and watch his recent statement. He acknowledges that the last time there was peace and justice and security was during the Ottoman Caliphate, and the West messed up after that. Because you can't draw artificial borders within communities who were tribes and families that lived together for over 1,000 years. So they messed up. So for us to say that restorative justice is simply a historical fact. When was the last time this particular region, the Levant, experienced and had law, order, security, coexistence and cohesion? It was under the Ottoman Caliphate.
And not only the Ottoman Caliphate, it goes back 1,200 years.
Of course.
So,
but the last date was the Ottoman. But yeah, it goes back centuries before that.
Yes. So that is what I advocate for. Of course, that doesn't go in line with left advocates for a free Palestine. They would want a secular,
nationalist,
socialist Palestine that's integrated into the IMF, takes world bank loans, everyone gets a mortgage, you have a Western capitalist system. It's socialism. It may be socialism, but it will be integrated into the wider American, Pax Americana global system.
It's the other way. It's basically a capitalist state with socialist aesthetics and jargon. That's basically what it is.
Yes, so what I'm referring to is an autarky, a Muslim autarky within the region, including Syria, including Iraq, all that region. The water crisis in Iraq. Why is that water crisis occurring? You have Turkey, which has a large population of Muslims. You have Iran, and you have Iraq. Shouldn't there be some kind of cohesion on water preservation of the Euphrates River? That can only be restored through the Khilafah.
But Sheikh, just before we break for Salah, that notion might be quite far away. I mean, we believe in that, we pray for that, we want that, we will work for it, inshallah ta'ala, in our own different ways and means for our different capacities. What I'm positing to you though, before that happens, there could be other setups that lead to that. For example, if you look at the Seljuk state, if you look at the Ottoman state, if you look at the Ghaznavids, whoever it may be, before they made an official declaration of a sultanate, or like Sultan Selim rahimahullah in 1517 when he declared the Khilafah of the Ottoman dynasty, there were different setups before that. It was a beylik, then it was a sultanate, and then he declared Khilafah in 1517. So I'm saying before we get to what we hope and pray for, there could be other setups that are unideal.
The distinction is twofold. One is the international order now is totally different. At that time, for instance, the Baytul Mal was not reliant on a World Bank and an IMF. The corporate capitalism and commodity control that we have today, the commodities are controlled by international corporations. That leads to a big disparity between the model you describe and the current modern situation that we have, the status quo that we have. So understanding that problem is the first thing. The second is, what is the practical solution to dismantling that? Is the practical solution a military one, or is it an intellectual intifada? That we take commodity control first, which means our minerals, our lands, taking control of the farming lands, taking control of the minerals and the resources, taking control of the water sources, which Israel at the moment is occupying all the water sources of the Palestinian region, including Syria. So when they take Quneitra, they take the Golan Heights, it's to strangle Syria in the future with the water of Syria. They control 40% of Syria's water. Abdullah of Jordan is strangled because the water is controlled. So how do we take on the current system? I believe what I refer to as an intellectual intifada is commodity control, is taking control of our own resources.
Can that happen within the nation state model, what you're describing? Taking over the control of the ummah's commodities, its resources. What I'm asking you is
it's feasible.
Okay.
It's feasible.
So before we get to an Islamic governance system in Bilad al-Sham, what I'm saying is, can we get there? Before that, can we have a two-state solution, one-state solution, other events that lead to this? Or in your mind, do you think, no, it can't be that, it has to be one or the other?
So there's a few case studies now that you've mentioned, Syria case study, Palestine case study. Can we have a case study Palestine, a two-state solution? The answer is two-state solution will never occur, because you study the history of the Oslo Accords, 93 to 2000, 40,000 acres were taken during the Oslo Accords, leading to the second intifada in 2000. It's a carrot dangling policy that America has carried out, because de facto Zionists control the American foreign policy.
Do you believe that though?
Yes, of course. Christian Zionists within them.
But don't you take agency away from America? I mean, that's a huge debate that's taking place.
No, Zionists.
Okay, but
Zionists.
these are Zionist American Christians.
Yes, ideologically they're Zionists.
Yeah, sorry.
So like the UAE are Zionists.
Yeah, but there's
Bin
those.
Zayed is a Zionist.
No, you're correct. But there's those who believe that the Jews and the Zionists control American policy. I'm like, no, you have to give America.
Well, they happen to be American Jews.
but there's
Some
also
of them.
but there's also American non-Jews.
Yes, so Trump is a Zionist.
Yes.
Case in example. But so it's a carrot dangling foreign policy that gives time, and I noticed this when I visited the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
It's entrenching Israel over a long-term period. Entrenching them, allowing the 700,000 plus illegal settlers in the West Bank.
To carry on taking land.
Carry on taking land. So military action, Israel, the solution against Israel is only military action. That was the failure of the Muslim world in the past 2 years, that we had no military action. That's why I referred to our previous podcast. I said Muslims should be focused just on Palestine. And I still say that. All military action of Muslims, nations, should be taken against only Israel. That Pakistan should refocus on Israel. And I said that about
Israel's been talking about Pakistan.
No, but do you remember I mentioned
Pakistan?
I said this about Pakistan.
That's been a consistent position of yours for time, though.
The critics at the time, Pakistani critics, they said to me, why is he calling for us to focus on Palestine when we have the Indian border? Now those Pakistani critics have changed. They have changed their view. They acknowledge what I said was true. You may think your border is far, but it will affect you. So
Israel's been talking about Pakistan and Turkey.
But it seems obvious, but at the time it didn't. It's a prescient statement that I'm making now. Military action against Israel. Syria on the other
By
hand,
whom? Just for clarity, before GB News get this clip and make you do the rounds again.
Military intervention by Pakistan, by Turkey.
Muslim majority country
Muslim
armies,
majority countries.
not militias.
Egypt.
Not people traveling there to do things. You're talking about armies of the Muslim countries.
Of course, and of course, Palestinian resistance, according to international law, has the right to bear arms.
Of course, that's embedded in.
So, additionally, but remember the double standards. If a man goes to Ukraine to carry arms,
that's absolutely legit.
It's legitimate
he's
because
praised as a hero.
Ukraine is white and has a Jewish leader. If a person carries arms in certain countries which are in favor of a specific ethnic group or capitalism, Zionist capitalism, then it would be seen as freedom fighting. But the second case study is Syria. You mentioned Syria, but I will say not only Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, these kind of countries, even Egypt. These countries need to make sustainable economies. Self-sustaining. So I'm not calling that they necessarily involve themselves in war, Syria especially. They make sustainable economy. Syria has everything it needs in terms of farming land, water for irrigation. They can make agrarian reforms.
It's a resourceful country.
And they can reform their economy.
Rich, yeah.
So they do not need to rely on Turkey, because now Turkey will plan to make Syria a market for Turkish goods. Even though Erdogan increased European goods into his own country, bringing down the production of Turkey and therefore bring the lira going weaker, because when they export now, no one wants to buy Turkish goods because the production levels in Turkey have decreased.
Because it was flooded with European products.
Yes, because he was allowing European products to come in. But similarly, making Syria a dumping market. McDonald's will open. Remember, there was no McDonald's when I was there. McDonald's will open, making the Syrians, like the Jordanians and other nations surrounding the region, just consumers of McDonald's and everything else.
I believe the Syrians are blessed, inshallah, to not,
Syria is blessed
to not follow that trajectory.
But autarky, meaning internal, like Afghanistan, Taliban, even though I'm against their alliances with India, with Modi, but they have made an autarky within their own country, self-sustaining farming and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they should move away from Modi and.
So more of that, basically.
More of that.
Sustainable, self-dependent countries
And commodity control.
commodity control. A viral interview did the rounds, and it's absolutely relevant that we mention it simply because we've been talking about Palestine, we're talking about Quds, we're talking about Tommy Robinson, talking about the Zionist lobby, and this was an interview that took place around a week, 2 weeks ago from the time of filming, of a young Gujarati Deobandi Imam, Umayr Mulla, from Leicester originally, was the Imam of Masjid Khazraj in Nottingham, but has been suspended as of now. Don't know if he might be reinstated, but it was a 16-minute interview between him and Tommy, and it's received, I would say, at least from my anecdotal observation, it's been overwhelmingly negative amongst the Muslims. It's unfortunate that much of the praise have actually come from Zionists and Israelis. What was your overall gist of that engagement?
So the interview was brought to my attention and
You saw clips of it first, didn't you? You didn't see the whole thing first, did you? Or did you see the whole thing first?
clips. I was informed of what he said, and then I watched the entire interview later. And
Was it worse than what you were told?
yes. So the problem I had with the interview were a few things. I don't know if the Imam had pre-planned this with Tommy Robinson.
No, they bumped into each other. Let's give them back.
So it was genuinely
Yeah.
organic.
Yeah. What he mentioned in the interview was that I knew you were here. So the Imam said to Tommy in the most cringeworthy way, I knew you were here. I was wondering if I'd bump into you. So they knew that. So
That's suspicious because
but let's have Husna done for him, Shah. Come on.
not anyone who supports Israel, I would not have husn al-dhan.
Yeah, but that's Tommy though. I'm not talking about.
No,
we're talking about
the Imam, because the Imam, he says the
He supports the state of Israel.
the state of Israel.
Or the existence of the state of Israel.
So I would not have husn al-dhan of anyone who's pro-Israel.
But he's not pro-Israel in that sense.
No, that is pro-Israel, meaning he says they have a right to have their state in this land where they have been in for 3,000 years, false.
And
Palestinians need their safe space.
Yeah. Safe
So
spot.
that's one fallacy in the interview. Let's go into this 3,000-year history.
Of Israelis.
So this Bob the Builder, some YouTuber,
Yeah.
Hyde Park, Islamophobe,
who you met in outside Villa Park.
outside Villa Park, he referred to Jesus as a Jew. And I said Jesus was not a Jew. And he insisted Jesus was a Jew. I said Jesus was an Israelite. There is a racial categorization of Israelites. So not every Israelite is a Jew, but many Israelites adopted Judaism as a religion. Judaism is a religion. It's a split from Islam, split from the deen of Musa alayhi salam. So Judaism can be adopted or has been adopted by different ethnic and racial groupings. And this is why I said to him, Netanyahu is not Semitic, but he is Jewish. That's his religion. But he is not from the land of Palestine. This is why many of them will not have DNA tests, or they will mix with the Mizrahi Jews in order to have
A darker tint.
a darker skin tone, or DNA, which is Middle Eastern.
Or Semitic. Yeah.
So for him to say they've been in the land for 3,000 years is false. Many of the Jews are not Semitic and are not from historical Palestine. Secondly, validating them religiously. In the Quran, there is a naskh, abrogation of the right of Bani Israel to occupy Palestine. That was a historical fact that happened in the time of Musa alayhi salam.
when they rejected to fight.
In the time of Dawood alayhi salam, when Dawood alayhi salam had a khilafah. That was a prophetic historical time that was not a racist, apartheid, ethnic regime. It was based on the deen of Allah.
Yes.
It was based upon the revelation
Yeah.
from God.
Yeah.
So all that is mansukh, abrogated.
None of that counts.
Mansukh by what? Mansukh by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who wrote Tamim ad-Dari on the command of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A leather parchment was written out, upon which was the land of Palestine was given to the descendants of Tamim ad-Dari. And then you had Abu Ubaidah bin al-Jarrah conquering Palestine. And now Palestine is Darul Islam until the end of the world. Until the end of times, Palestine will remain Darul Islam.
Meaning from an Islamic perspective, it wouldn't be justified or legitimate from an Islamic perspective to give that authority to any other group.
Yes, so you can, this is why some people contacted me regarding other ulama in the UK, whether Indian or Pakistani or any other racial background, who believe in a two-state solution is, for me, is problematic. From a religious perspective, there is no two-state solution. There is only one solution, which is the restoration of the Khilafah into Palestine. That is the religious standpoint. That if you're an Imam or a scholar or an alim, you're speaking from Al-Quran or Sunnah, you're speaking from the four madhabs, the restoration of Khilafah in Palestine is the only solution. There is no other solution in terms of two-state solution.
From a religious point of view, from a textual point
from
of view.
a religious standpoint, theological standpoint. And I can debate any alim on that. If anyone disagrees, I can debate them from Al-Quran or Sunnah on that issue. So that was the first major issue with that interview. And then for him not to challenge Tommy Robinson on his insults of upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the Quran, on Islam. Rather than that, meaning there's a time and place when you display husnul akhlaq, good manners, time and place.
That wasn't that place, was it?
That was not the place to...
Right outside Masjid al-Aqsa.
Yes.
In the parameters of it.
Whilst
there's armed Israeli officers there and dancing settlers going up and down where the interview was happening.
Exactly. And taking a selfie with Tommy Robinson in the context of pretending to be his friend, not taking into account his insults on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam
on a near daily basis,
and then making the sectarian and ethnic divide amongst Muslims. So identifying himself as a Deobandi to a kafir who asks in the context to divide Muslims, meaning if this man asked me, are you a Shia or Sunni, I would say, I would totally not entertain that conversation with him, because he's objective in asking whether you are a Shia or a Sunni.
It's not in good faith.
It's to divide. The resistance against the occupation. So to identify yourself with a town in India, firstly, let me tell you my position on that. I do not believe in the identity of a Deobandi or a Barelvi, because South Asian Muslims were always traditionally Hanafi Sufi. Prior to these divisions coming about, they were just Hanafi Maturidi Sufis. Aside from the Shia population in Lucknow and other regions, there was Shia and Sunni. So for him to make an identification as a Deobandi, meaning ascribing himself to an Indian town, I take exception to that. When people say they are Deobandi, they should just identify themselves as Sunni Hanafi. I take exception to that, because our identity should be Sunni Hanafi. The disputes between Deoband and Bareli go back, and I mentioned this to you, they can always go back to the Fatawa Alamgiri. The Fatawa Alamgiri, which was written in the time of Aurangzeb, Sultan Aurangzeb. And if they refuse to go back to the Fatawa Alamgiri, I can say majority of Barelvis would go back to Fatawa Alamgiri, and many Deobandis would go back to Fatawa Alamgiri. But if they refuse, they could go back to the books of Haji Imdadullah Muhajir Makki, who's an alim they both agree upon, who was the Shaykh to the Deobandi Shuyukh. And his book Faisla Haft Masala. So irrelevant to that, why are you identifying yourself to an Indian town, to a man who insults the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? If you met Rushdie and Rushdie asked you, are you Barelvi or Deobandi, what will you say to Rushdie? You wouldn't entertain the conversation.
Because you know where he's coming from.
Then you have the ethnic divide he's done by saying you've become extreme because of Pakistani Kashmiris. That was the least
I would say that was
issue. But it's still dividing amongst the Muslims. Now that person, I consequently, I made a video saying he doesn't represent anyone, in the sense he doesn't represent Gujaratis, because I know personally Gujaratis who are anti-Israel.
Yes, so do I. The vast majority are, alhamdulillah.
Ismail Patel.
Yes, our brother Ismail Patel
Friends
from
of
Al-Aqsa.
Many the brothers I made you meet in South Africa.
Yes.
Riyadh.
Muhammad Jalal from Thinking Muslim.
So
Gujarat.
many.
Yes,
So many. So he doesn't represent that ethnic group. Secondly, does he represent the Deobandis? I would want a condemnation of him from the Deobandis, because I condemn Barelvis who support Israel. Qari Asim.
He blasted a lot of them.
I don't care if you're Barelvi or Deobandi. When it comes to this issue, we are consistent, and there should be a condemnation of him, irrelevant to what school a person belongs to. So Qari Asim claimed to represent Barelvis, and there was a Shia Imam who claimed to represent the Shia. He doesn't represent the Shia. The Shia are very evidently against Israel.
The pro-Iranian Shia, yeah.
Yes, so the pro-Iranian Shia. And then with the Deobandis, they are very evidently against Israel.
Yeah.
So there should be condemnation. But instead, there was not much condemnation, because what we had was some of them who were strong to condemn me on other issues. They were strong to condemn me on other issues, on smaller issues. Mm-hmm. When it came to him, they did not come out to condemn.
I mean, look, you made the video, I wrote an article, other brothers have made videos. You know, people obviously felt this was a disservice, that after 2 years of a genocide, seeing the scenes that we've seen, that if a graduate from a celebrated seminary in the UK is espousing these views, then what the hell have we learned in the last 2 years? What's even more concerning is that if, and I put this if in bold and an asterisk, if this is a mindset which does exist amongst young tullab or young graduates and imams, then we have a bigger problem at hand. The question I ask you is this. You've called out Tommy Robinson for a debate. Others have. He had a 60-minute interview. And by the way, Tommy Robinson then accused him of taqiyya afterwards. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, but literally 2 days later, he goes, the Imam was doing taqiyya. He actually believes killing non-Muslims for just rejecting Islam. So there you go. There goes that out the window. Should there be some red lines in who we debate? Or are you of the position that so long as you are competent, qualified, have the relevant knowledge and debating skills, everyone should be up for debate? What's your personal position?
The competence and knowledge is essential. Articulation.
Is there anyone you wouldn't debate? Would you debate Netanyahu?
Yes, I would debate Netanyahu. Why not?
Okay, so you're actually of the same position of hijab and others.
I would debate Netanyahu.
Okay.
And I wouldn't debate him with good manners. Or, meaning he's a genocider. He's a murderer. But
so you're of the position that everyone is open to. You will be open to debating anyone, subject to you having the relevant knowledge.
Yes, as long as you have the relevant knowledge, because it goes in accordance with Al-Quran. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Debate them in the best way, but its competence is the main thing. Mm-hmm. I would entertain a debate if I am able to represent Islam correctly.
So where do you place then Muslim debaters' willingness or openness to debate someone like Netanyahu? Because don't get it twisted, Sheikh. Netanyahu's been on American podcasts. He's been on the Nelk Boys. He's been on...
He wouldn't debate a Muslim.
I know he wouldn't. But what I'm saying is that it's not beyond the realms of impossibilities that, you know, you could end up, maybe not Netanyahu, but you could find yourself on a TV show with a senior Israeli policymaker. So where do we draw the line?
Competence. So if I'm not as skilled at politics...
But what happened to boycotting Israel? What happened to not giving them legitimacy by sharing a platform with them? I thought these were positions that the community held for some years.
No, debate is something that's a part of our deen. So Musa alayhi salam debated Fir'aun. Mm-hmm. Ibrahim alayhi salam debated Nimrud. So debating a tyrant is part of our deen. The only distinction I would make is you need real competence. Mm-hmm. So competence not only in deen, competence in politics, history,
and the ability
geography,
to debate,
articulation, performance, all of these factors. So if I believe I will underperform, I will select someone who I believe will perform better in that particular debate. But going back to this particular Imam, there was the issue also that of Ibn Kathir,
Yes, and about
rahimahullah.
Yeah.
He did not defend the position of Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, which I will just mention and clarify. The Shafi'i school, and Ibn Kathir was a Shafi'i, holds the position that the illah, the ratio legis of jihad, is kufr. So the Shafi'is wage war based on what? Kufr. That because they are kuffar, we wage war on them. But the Hanafi school takes that the ratio legis of jihad is hiraba, which is warfare from the kuffar. So Ibn Kathir, from what Tommy Robinson has been told or informed, that passage may have been from discussing the legal basis for jihad. It's a issue of jurisprudence beyond the scope of the intelligence of Tommy Robinson. So how I would have responded to Tommy at that point would be that that's beyond your intelligence or your pay grade to understand jurisprudence. It's a simple response. And then, of course, selectively quoting from Al-Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, and then not being able to respond to that adequately was a poor performance from that Imam.
If anyone saw that clip, they would have taken what Tommy said and his citation of Ibn Kathir, the distorted citation of Ibn Kathir, and many would have taken that as a verse of the Quran, which he basically. So there wasn't even a clear correction that what you are saying is exegesis.
Yes.
What you are saying is there's scholars. What we got instead was no, that's his position, and people can have their position, as opposed to a proper representation or defense of what the position was.
But inshallah, if the debate goes ahead, of course, Tommy Robinson will have his own representative. If that debate goes ahead, then I will demonstrate to them that all their positions are fallacious. That is what needs to be demonstrated to the English public. Mainly the racists are perhaps in England, and in Scotland you find the Glasgow Rangers fans to be racist. Of course, the Celtic fans are
fine. They're legends. Have you had any interactions from Tommy privately?
Not privately, no.
Because he's been quote tweeting you and tweeting you and obviously.
Yes, so I do respond, and the reason for responding, people have said to me, why are you responding to a non-scholar, a person who's not an academic? And I will tell you the answer. Those who are saying, why am I responding? People like myself who have studied the deen of Allah for decades, we have an obligation, an onus to represent the deen in this country. And if this man is insulting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's insulting the Quran, he's insulting Islam, it's an obligation of the Ahlul Ilm to come forward and respond at least to his false representation of Islam. That is the absolute minimum. And those who are saying that a scholar of Islam should not be debating him, then we need people to come forward and take him on. So that happened today. Someone actually contacted me and said, you shouldn't be debating these people. But my response to that is, I do not view things like this. Some people look at things like this. They say, my platform is bigger and his platform is smaller. Some people look at the issue like this. Some people look at it as, I'm more qualified, he's less qualified. I've never had that attitude. You can have me in the local area in Spark Brook, and a man can come along with no qualifications. If he's insulting Islam, I will engage him. That's my approach. Because I see it as a fard that on Yawm al-Qiyamah I will be answering, this man was running his tongue off about Islam, about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about the Quran. Where were you? Were you living in your ivory tower, believing I'm an academic or I'm an imam or I'm a scholar and I will only engage on a certain platform? Or were you taking on those who are insulting Islam on every level? And I believe I'm the latter, not the former.
My final question to wrap up the podcast, we've covered a lot, mashallah, tabarakallah. Given the 2 years of the genocide that we've seen in Gaza, the events in Syria, events in Bangladesh, events in Afghanistan post 2021, all the different changes that are taking place, this type of Trump's new Middle East, whereby he appears to, at least on paper, seem to be giving more leverage to some of the Gulf states, and perhaps at least on paper from outside, here and there, has been critical of Israel. He has this vision of the new Middle East, which would be, it's funny enough because he's not actually stood up to any of it, but his America First, Make America Great Again was all about less wars, less military intervention, whilst he's obviously been fully funding an army in the genocide in Gaza, bombed Iran, and is talking about invading Nigeria and all sorts. Given all these key events that we've seen in the last couple of years, the absolute failure of any Muslim majority government to intervene in any meaningful way beyond backdoor diplomacy within the body of the UN, is the ummah in a state of awakening? Is it in a state of still in occupation? Or is it at the cusp of revival? And I ask this to you as someone who's written a book about the intellectual intifada, about your own thoughts about the return of the Khilafah, as well as having your own positions with regards to eschatological events. I know it's a huge question I'm asking you, and I'm opening the floor for you to end on this. Where do you see we're at? Because on the one hand, you could see that the Palestinians have resisted. They've kept true to their word and the promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've seen that the Syrians have done what they've had to do, as have Afghans, Bangladeshis, Pakistan, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. A lot's happening. You said before we started filming that whenever we filmed a podcast, something of significant political events take place after. What's your general reading of what's happening and where we're going?
So what we observed in Syria was what I believe is to be fitna to Sham, the major tribulations in Bilad Sham. I would say observe the region in terms of seismic shifts, observe the water. What is happening to the water in the region? Why is Israel occupying all the water sources? What is happening with the Euphrates River? The water levels are going down. This has ramifications in the region in terms of farming, irrigation, as well as Ashratu Sa'a, the signs at the end of times. The next war will be over water in the region. So water is something so important that it affects all the countries surrounding the River Nile and Sudan. Mm-hmm. So the events we are observing now in Sudan, it has an effect on Egypt, the levels of migration. And then also, if you remember the disputes between Egypt and the southern African countries, southern to Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia. So that is something to watch. The Sisi regime is something to observe. Events in Egypt, because there is the reports that mention Egypt drying like a piece of dung and it disintegrates. And the leader of Egypt, there are some reports regarding that. Of course, some of these hadith, the asanid are weak. So this is one of the criticisms. There was a group of Deobandi ulama who criticized my book. And the only reason they wanted to criticize the book is because I make mention of Tahdhirun Nas in the book. So they ignored the rest of the book and they just focused on that section. But they made a criticism that he gives citation to weak hadith, weak meaning the chains are weak, from the book of Nu'aym bin Hammad al-Fitan. But if you read that book, the chains may be weak, but some of the events foretold in that book have come about. The prophecies have come about. Mm-hmm. And one of them is, it mentions Egypt. But just look at Egypt geopolitically at the moment. The south of Egypt is unstable because of Sudan. You have the issue in Gaza,
Rafah.
In the Rafah crossing. You have the economic situation of Egypt. You have the imprisonment of political opponents, especially the Ikhwan. That will have a long-term effect in the country. Egypt is a country to observe. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Sham, the water of the Euphrates in Sham, Iraq, and in Turkey. That is something to observe. Then, of course, there are changes occurring in Pakistan. As we observe now, you have the imprisonment of Imran Khan, PTI leader. You have the Hafiz Saad, the leader of TLP, missing in action. Hundreds of TLP members killed. And then you have the politics of the Sharif brothers, embarrassingly recently, calling for
the Nobel Peace Prize.
Peace Prize. Initially, I thought it was a mockery.
No, he meant it.
And initially, when they announced it previously, but when he announced it, I was watching this in Holland, by the way. Funnily enough, during the tour when I mentioned the Maccabi fans, and when I watched this, it was cringeworthy, it was embarrassing. But Pakistan is undergoing major shifts also politically, because there is no real opposition. If you imprison Imran Khan, what real opposition is there to the Sharif brothers?
There isn't one at the moment.
Yes, so the country is undergoing change. Bangladesh, after the ousting of Hasina, is an interesting point to watch. By the way, Intellectual Intifada, the first country to translate Intellectual Intifada, which I gave you the copy. Why are they quick to translate that book? Because they are looking for an alternative to what they have had. And the book's been distributed, thousands of copies in Bangladesh. So the entire region, when you analyze the region, Iran, we must commend Iran, the regime in Iran, for bombing Tel Aviv, for that action. I'm very glad they bombed Tel Aviv. They destroyed some of the infrastructure of Tel Aviv. But what does that tell us? That if the Muslims did unite and concentrate on Palestine, that is another event to watch out for.
How far away are we from that?
The disintegration of what is known as Israel.
Yeah, so how far away do you think we are from that?
Of course,
Let's end on that note. How far?
As Muslims, we do not believe in Nostradamus type prophecy.
But but you have firasa, you have feeling, you have intuition, you have gut instincts, you could be wrong. I
believe very soon, I pray to Allah that the Palestinians, and I believe that it will be disintegrated at the hands of the Palestinians. How? All it takes is mass pressure on Tel Aviv. Ultimately, what is known as Israel is one city, Tel Aviv. It takes mass pressure on Tel Aviv, the destruction of its infrastructure, its electrical grids, civil war amongst the Jews, secular Jews versus religious Jews. The so-called religious Jews are more extreme
than the religious Jews,
than the secular Jews. So the dismantlement of the Knesset, the destruction of Tel Aviv, perhaps at the hands of a regime foreign to Palestine, the civil war amongst the Jewish population, between the extreme. Well, there is no right wing, left wing in what is known as Israel. Anyone who takes an Israeli passport is an extremist. So, meaning, I liken them to the Nazi regime, but the difference being that Nazis ruled their own country. Germans ruled their own country. This is not their country. So it's an occupation. So people forget that France occupied Algeria for 150 years. That's a long, extended period of time, to the point that they annexed Algeria to France.
As part of Greater France.
As Greater France. That's finished today. So the civil war amongst the Jewish population and the breaking out of the Palestinians from their concentration camps of Gaza, who are the Jewish population placing behind those borders, that the barriers they place? Are they placing themselves behind barriers? No, reversely, you can say that. They have been ghettoized from the time of Germany to the point that today their mentality has become ghettoized, that they're barring themselves up from the others. So the Palestinians can break down those barricades and take the land. And that also includes a meltdown of the Jordanian border. Now, How can a potential meltdown occur in the Jordanian border? That's something to observe also. Palestinian population in Jordan and a meltdown of the Jordanian border where the Palestinians come into Palestine. And perhaps, I will finish on this note, perhaps we can arrange even a million-man march. I called for a million-man march in 2017. It's been nearly 8 years. Perhaps we can arrange a million-man march, international million-man march. Where from? We need to organize the logistics, perhaps from South Lebanon. Perhaps from South Lebanon, we can call for a million-man march into Palestine. Perhaps from Jordan. Whatever the logistics may dictate, we need to get out our thinking caps.
No no current regime's going to allow that, Sheikh.
Let's get our thinking hats out.
I think exploring ideas.
Yes,
Okay,
and people, place your 6 thinking hats, the different ways you can make a plan in order to have mass population entering into what is known as Palestine. That is the only way. So, as I said, just to remind you, Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, these are places to watch out for in the coming years or months.
Sheikh, Jazakallah khair. That was a really good roundup. A long overdue 3rd appearance. Allah bless you and preserve you, Ameen.
Inshallah.
And I look forward to our next sit down, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah.
Brothers, sisters and friends, I hope you all enjoyed this extensive episode with Shaykh Asrar as much as I did. I know many of you have been requesting it. His 3rd appearance. Do remember you can find this episode on all 4 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky. Do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.